Hey, good afternoon, everyone. It is now 2:59. We're just about to turn 3 o'clock in a while. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today in our session on boundaries with heart, how to be firm without being harsh. And once again, we are very fortunate to have as our speaker today Ma'am Melissa Antoinette Garcia from the University of Asia and the Pacific School of Education and Human Development and the head of the Child Development and Education Center. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our speaker today, Melissa Garcia.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. It's nice to be back. Thank you very much for that introduction, Sir Man. Okay, there. Do you see my screen now? Okay, again, good day, everybody. So, my name is Melissa Antoinette Garcia. My students, again, both in the preschool and in the university, call me Teacher Mel. And I've been in education for running 10 years already. And you see, over time, I've had the privilege of working with learners across the whole spectrum, meaning from the very young in nurse. So I started with nursery students, right? On my first year of teaching, I taught nursery. And then I transitioned to teaching kinder students and have been teaching kinder ever since. And then I also teach university students. Um, I've also had a stint of teaching graduate students and even practitioners in the field like you. So, um, throughout all of those experiences, I've seen one truth I've seen one truth again and again. So, our learners, our students, they don't just learn from our lessons. So they learn from our presence, our consistency, and the boundaries that we set. So the classroom climate and the way we show up as teachers, those matter just as much as the content that we teach, right? So that's why I'm so excited to share this session with you today because when we get boundaries right, so I always tell this to teachers at the CDE Center, when we get boundaries right, we don't just manage the classroom. So we create spaces where our students feel safe, they feel respected, and a space where they're able to grow. Okay. So, this is what we will be talking about today. So, at large, this session is meant for to help teachers establish professional boundaries with warmth and clarity. So, we'll try to strike a balance between compassion and firmness. And to do that, first we'll talk about why boundaries matter, and then I'm not so sure if you're familiar with this framework, but we'll talk about teachers as warm demanders, and then the importance of reflecting on our boundaries and how that may translate into what we do inside the classroom. And later we'll also have like an interactive task of identifying what we can say in certain situations. So I hope for your input later. Okay. All right. So, um, let's begin with pausing and pondering first. Okay. So, I want you to think back to your favorite teacher, right? A teacher who really got you. Now, think about what was it about that specific teacher or those teachers, right? So, if you are able and willing, you can type in the chat box. What was it about your favorite teacher? Why are they your favorite? Okay. So now, when I personally think back to my favorite teachers, they're actually, it wasn't about what they actually taught, right? So it's not, well, for some, it may be the subject, but it isn't usually like that. So it's usually how they made us feel inside their classrooms, right? More likely than not, like for me specifically, um, my favorite teachers are the ones who made me feel na they believe in me, right? So they believe in me, but at the same time, they're the ones who were challenging me. So they weren't the quote unquote nice teachers who just let everything slide. So they weren't also the ones who would just bark out orders here and there, right? So usually, chances are they were firm, but you know that they cared. And that's what today is all about, right? How to be clear and consistent with students while also staying kind and compassionate. Okay, so every classroom, all our classrooms has, we all have a culture in our classroom, right? So some lean permissive, so where students are followed, so where students run the show, and others lean harsh, where students comply out of fear, not of respect. But today we'll be talking about a third way, right? A way to be clear, consistent, and firm without losing the kindness, right? So that's our focus for today: boundaries with a heart. Okay. So this is something that I want to leave with you. So compassionate does not mean permissive, and firm does not mean unkind. So let us dig deeper into that. All right. So let's talk about why boundaries matter. Right? We have to understand that boundaries are actually not walls. Okay, they're guidelines for connection. So first, boundaries, they provide clarity. So students know what's okay and what isn't. And without that clarity, the classroom becomes unpredictable. And we know that our students, they thrive in routines, they thrive in predictability. And then boundaries also build trust. When expectations are consistent, students feel safe. And that safety does not come from any of the ends, leniency or strictness, but with that predictability that we are um, ensuing in our classroom. And then boundaries also nurture respect and relationship. So there are students and there will be students who will resist rules in the moment, right? But in the long run, you see clear and fair boundaries, those build respect for the teacher. So when students push back against boundaries, it's easy to feel that we're being tested, right? And we are. But boundaries are how our students figure out, can I trust you? Can I trust my teacher to mean what you're saying? Will you keep me safe even if I push the boundaries? Again, rethink and reframe our understanding of what boundaries are. Boundaries, they are not about control. Okay. So boundary, they're about safety and trust. So as a preschool teacher, the my what do you call this? I can akin it to like playground fences, for instance. So imagine a playground without a fence, right? So children will tend to hover near the middle, hesitant, uncertain of the limits. Now, if we put up fences around it, what then happens, right? They run free right up to the edges because they know where safety ends and where danger begins, right? So, really, boundaries do not restrict freedom, they actually make freedom possible. And the same is true inside our classrooms. Students thrive when they know the limits. So, this is why boundaries are important from the teacher's perspective, from the teacher's point of view. But we also have to understand why students need boundaries. So, we have to understand it from their lens, right? So, first, predictability comes anxiety. So, many of our students, they arrive in our classrooms with unpredictable lives outside of school. And so a consistent teacher boundary. So for example, telling them na, oh, phones should be tucked away during class hours, or raise your silent thumb up before you blurt out your answer, or what? Walking feet inside the classroom. That provides order, right? So from the point of view of the students, oh, I know what to expect in this classroom, right? And then second, boundaries teach self-regulation. So s- while it's external first, right? It's from the teacher to the students. Students internalize those limits over time. So, for example, one of your students might argue when you tell them to put their phone away, for instance. So over the weeks, as the teacher enforces that boundary kindly but consistently, so the student will be able um, to self correct. So understanding what to expect inside the classroom and what is expected of them. And then boundaries also signal belief in students. So when we lean towards the more permissive side, when you don't put boundaries, it's like telling your students, I don't think you can handle responsibility. But when you're on the harsh side, it might mean I do not trust you, right? But balanced boundaries put forth the the understanding that I believe in you. I know that you can meet high expectations, and I'll be here to scaffold and support you to get there. Okay, so thinking of classroom examples now. So for example, without boundaries. So during a group work, a collaborative activity, so a student might repeatedly talk over others during group work, and the permissive teacher, for example, ignores it. So what will happen? Other students will feel frustrated. They will feel unsafe to contribute. But with boundaries, with the exact same scenario, and you are the teacher saying, you see, everybody voices need to take turns. That's how we respect each other here, right? So when repeated and when teacher has consistent follow up, so we'll pause until everybody's ready to respect the turn. That's when the student will learn, oh, my voice matters and so does my classmates. So the teacher really means what they say, right? So if boundaries matter that much, no, the question is, what kind of boundaries are we setting? And to explore that, um, let's put boundaries on a continuum, right? So from absent to permissive to authoritative. Let's check. Okay. Now, the question now is, how do we draw the line? And you see, not all boundaries are created equal. Some teachers avoid them altogether, some overdo them, and some strike the right balance. And to understand what healthy boundaries look like, let's go through the continuum. Okay, so I'm sure you are familiar with the different parenting practices, and our classroom management could be put in the same continuum. So, first, on the far left are absent boundaries, right? So, what does that mean? No boundaries at all. So, if we translate that into um, a simple phrase, I don't step in, right? So teacher avoids discipline, rules are unclear, rarely enforced. And what's the impact of that on students? So they might feel insecure because they don't know where the limits are, and chaos fills the classroom. So for example, students may chatter during instruction. We know that, right? So every day there are children who really, or there are students who really can't help but chatter. And if we keep on ignoring that, soon all the voices escalate until the lesson collapses. What's the message of that to students? My teacher doesn't really mean what they say. Rules aren't real here. They're saying, oh, it's posted on the wall. They talk about it before class, but there's no follow through. So they're just rules. It's not enforced. You see, some teachers stay absent because they don't want conflict. But when we avoid that conflict, what students hear is silence, and silence communicates indifference. You don't mind, you don't care, right? And then the second one is permissive. And when we say permissive, these are the teachers who are all heart and no firmness. Again, translating it to a simple phrase, I want to be nice to my students, right? Teachers in this area of the continuum, they're caring, but they avoid confrontations, and they over accommodate misbehavior. So what's the impact of that on students? Students like the teacher for sure, but there is there are high chances that uh, the students might not take you seriously, right? So boundaries feel negotiable. So for example, a student does not want to engage in the task, doesn't want to do the activity that's designed for the day. So, the teacher in the a permissive teacher might say, "That's okay. Maybe we can do it tomorrow." And what message does that put forward? What message does it give the student? Expectations pala are optional, right? So permissiveness often comes from kindness because we don't want to upset our students. But that kindness without clarity leads to confusion and not growth. Okay? And then on the far end of the spectrum of the continuum is an authoritarian teacher. And what's that? All firmness, no heart. The usual strict teachers who will say, "Do it because I said so." Right? The teacher enforces rule rigidly, high demands, but low relational warmth. And what's the impact of that on students? Students would comply, sure, but that's out of fear. And because there's fear, resentment might build up. So the learning that happens inside your classroom feels like control. It doesn't, they don't feel the agency inside the classroom. Yeah. So for example, I can imagine because I've observed some schools na there are teachers who would say when a child starts talking to a classmate, to the seatmate, and then the teacher will say detention or face the wall or time out, right? So what's the message there? My teacher cares more about control than me. So authoritarian approach can produce short-term compliance, but in reality, there's a long-term disconnection that's building up, right? So we have to keep in mind that fear doesn't build respect. It actually builds distance, right? And then there's the fourth one, the authoritative stance, which is characterized by firmness and warmth. So, what does this mean? I care too much to let you go off easily, right? So, teachers combine care with clarity that we've been talking about. High expectations, but paired with support. And then, what's the impact of that on our students? They know where they stand. They may not always like the rules, but they respect them because they trust you. And the trust grows because of the consistency that they feel, right? So, this is actually the sweet spot, right? Boundaries here are firm enough to create that structure, but warm enough to sustain that connection. So, this is where the work of teaching and trust really happens. So that boundaries with heart live in this fourth space, the authoritative stance, right? So if the authoritative stance is the sweet spot, how do we live it out? And that is through the stance of a warm demander. Can you press the thumb up emoji if you've heard of the framework of the warm demander? Can you press the surprised emoji if this is the first time that you are hearing about the warm demander? Okay. So being the warm demander, this is how we operationalize our quote unquote being nice. Right? So what is a warm demander? So a warm demander is an educator who embodies both high expectations and genuine care for their students. So you see, this approach actually recognizes that students thrive in environments where they are supported, respected, and challenged. So we all know the idea of Vygotsky's ZPD, right? The zone of proximal development. What we provide our learners should not be too easy nor too hard, just the right amount of challenge, right? So again, our task is to create the environment, the learning space where students can meet their needs and they feel supported in doing so. Okay, so this is the warm demander framework by Judith Kleinfield. So it's a quadrant diagram that contrasts different teacher stances based on two dimensions. So, are there math teachers here? So, this is just like your Cartesian coordinate plane, right? So, um, the horizontal axis, it shows personal warmth to professional distance. And then the the vertical axis. So there's passive leniency to active demandingness, right? So let's try to break down each of these quadrants, right? So bottom right, the sentimentalist here, high warmth, but high in passive leniency also. So what's the core idea there? All heart, no push. So what's the characteristic? Um, build rapport, but often lowers or excuses standards. Over scaffolds, reduces rigor to protect students from failure, and doesn't allow students to engage in productive struggle. So we have to understand that they have to make mistakes, they have to struggle for them to learn too. So but the sentimentalists, they don't have that. So what's the message that students receive from sentimentalists? My teacher is kind, yes, but I don't really have to try hard here. Okay. And then in the quadrant 3 here, bottom left, what is it characterized by? So the elitists, there it's characterized by low warmth because there's professional distance, and low demandingness because its teacher is lenient. So core idea there, neither cares nor challenges, doesn't build trust or connection, holds low expectations, often unconsciously, focuses on independent learners or those who are already similar to the teachers or those who are near their standards and then disregard all the rest. So this quadrant reproduces inequity, right? As struggling students are left behind. So what message does do students receive when the teacher is from this quadrant? So my teacher doesn't notice me or believe in me. Okay? And then top left here in quadrant 2, technocrats. What is it characterized by? High demandingness, but high professional distance also, so low warmth. What's the core idea? All rigor, no relationship, right? So high academic standards, but little effort in building trust or rapport. Expect expects all students to meet the standards without much relational support. Instructionally competent teachers, yes, but emotionally distant. So what will your students feel if you're a technocrat? So my teacher is smart and strict, but I'm not sure if they care about me. And the last one, top right, which is quadrant 1, the warm demander, characterized by high warmth and high demandingness. So see, being demanding is not bad. It's not intrinsically bad, right? So core idea there, the ideal balance. So a warm demander builds rapport and trust, showing genuine interest in students because there's personal warmth. They hold high expectations, high standards, and scaffolds learning so that students can actually reach those standards. And again, encourages the productive struggle instead of rescuing students too quickly. And what do your students take away when you are a warm demander? So what they'll feel is that, oh, my teacher believes in me, cares about me, and will hold me accountable. So I should be responsible. Right? So only the warm demander stance produces that combination of safety, of care, and rigor that students need. So we have to remember our students will thrive. Similar to the ZPD of Vygotsky, students thrive when they are challenged but supported. Oh, no, not but supported, challenged and supported. Okay. Now, what kind of relationship do warm demanders have with students? So you see here, so the press and the challenge. Horizontal axis is the press or challenge. So that axis represents the level of structure, the level of expectation and accountability. And then the high press or challenge, this one, that signifies clear expectations, boundaries, and focus on accountability. So, and then for the vertical here, vertical axis, care and support, this axis is about the level of warmth, empathy, emotional support that's present in a relationship. So this relationship matrix, it highlights the importance of, again, finding the right balance between challenge and support, right? While the ideal varies depending on the individual needs and context of our students. Striving for that high challenge and high support quadrant generally leads to the most positive and um, growth promoting relationships. Okay, so if we go to quadrant three here, the aloof relationships, so low press and low care, neglectful environment, neither academic nor social emotional needs are met, right? Relationships are weak. So this quadrant represents a lack of both support and challenge. Okay, so they lack clear expectation and provides minimal feedback, for example, and have limited interaction with students. And um what does that translate to? So that creates a sense of apathy and disconnection in the classroom. Now, if we go to quadrant four here, a very friendly relationship. Now, low press but high care. So while a positive classroom climate is essential, right? That will be fostered in this quadrant. Again, without clear expectations and accountability, academic progress might be limited. So again, this quadrant, the friendly relationship quadrant, prioritizes warmth and acceptance, but may lack the structure and the accountability needed for the growth. Right. So quadrant two here, this is the authoritarian relationship. So we were just talking about that a while ago. High press, low care, cold, right? Compliance out of fear, the lack of intrinsic motivation though, right? So this quadrant emphasizes rules and expectations without connection. Okay. And that sweet spot again. So the high performance relationship, high press and high care. So um again, high standards, but but scaffolded well with care, with empathy, with responsiveness to the needs of each student. So when you have this high performance relationship, it's about pushing your students to grow while providing them with the encouragement that they need to succeed. Yeah. Okay. Now pause and ponder again. So reflect on your own experiences as educators. Under what quadrant does the relationship you forge have with your students? Are you in a friendly relationship? Are you in a aloof relationship? Are you in an authoritarian relationship? Or are you here in the sweet spot of high performance relationship? So if you're willing and comfortable, you may type your answer in the chat box. If not, the mere fact of us reflecting is a good start already. Okay. So that is us talking about relationships. Well, what about translating it to the teaching and learning? What kind of teaching and learning transpires inside a warm demander's classroom? So, horizontal axis here is the challenge or cognitive demand. Oh, the vertical axis means the challenge and cognitive demand, the level of intellectual rigor, the complexity, critical thinking that we expect from our students. And then the horizontal axis here um talks about support and scaffolding. So the guidance, the structure, the assistance we provide our students during the learning process. Okay. So if we look at it, high challenge or cognitive demand here, this side signifies learning experiences that push our students beyond their current understanding, requiring them to analyze, to think about, and to create beyond their means, right? So, and then low challenge or low cognitive demand, so just basic comprehension, recall, rote learning, so straightforward tasks. And then support here. So high support, high scaffolding, learning environment that's rich with support mechanisms such as, for example, clear instructions, modeling, collaborative opportunities. What else? Frequent and timely feedback, the use of rubrics, that's high support, high scaffold, right? So having that high support, high scaffold, it helps students gradually develop skills and confidence to tackle more challenging tasks later on. Now, when we talk about the low scaffold, um, it represents a more independent learning approach with less direct instruction or guidance. So, while promoting self-discovery, it may leave some students struggling without that support to make meaningful progress. Okay? Now, let's take a look at each of the quadrants now. So, quadrant 3, defeated. So, low expectation, low scaffolding. What does that mean? Lack of rigor and support, leading to minimal academic growth. So that represents a lack of both challenge and support. So could also equate or lead to superficial learning. Now, quadrant 4 here, dismissive, low expectation, but high scaffolding. So um, while support is crucial, it should not come as at the expense of appropriately challenging our students, right? So this quadrant kasi it prioritizes a supportive environment but not sufficiently challenges the students intellectually, right? So we're building confidence, but it might not lead to higher order thinking because or deeper understanding because we're saving them from doing so. Again, the struggle, we're saving them from the struggle that they need to learn. Yeah, when we go to quadrant 2 here, demanding, so that's high expectation and low scaffold. So that can lead to student frustration and disengagement because without adequate support, you see, high expectations can feel really overwhelming, especially for struggling learners. So again, this quadrant, the demanding quadrant, emphasizes rigor but might overwhelm students without adequate support. So it can lead to what? Frustration, disengagement, a feeling of inadequacy from our students, and particularly for those who are needing more guidance. And then the sweet spot, quadrant one, encouraging and empowering. So high expectations, high scaffolding. Again, that's the core of a warm demander. Teachers who are believing in the capacities of their students to achieve at high levels and provide the necessary support to make that happen, right? So again, a balanced approach um fosters deep understanding, critical thinking, independent learning, because we challenge them and provide the necessary scaffold for them to reach that. So again, pausing and pondering. So reflect on your own experiences as educators. Under what quadrant does the teaching and learning in your classroom fall under? So are you more the dismissive teacher, the defeated one, a demanding one, or um, the teaching and learning that happens in your classroom, is it encouraging and empowering? Okay. All right. So you see, when emotions run high in the classroom, now keep in mind everything that we've talked about so far. So when the emotions run high inside our classrooms, our words escalate, or de-escalate the moment of what's happening. So that's why having go-to lines, knowing what to say and how to say them matters. So having that like a toolkit or a word box of what to say lets us stay calm, consistent, and compassionate, right? So even when we're triggered. So let's take a look at some scenarios from the classroom, right? So as warm demanders, what will you say in the following situations? Okay. So first, off-task chattering during instruction, right? What would you say if your students keep on chattering even when you're in front? So if you have answers, please type them in the chat box. So let's use I'll use the continuum to give some sample examples. Thank you. Anyone who would like to share? So what will you say? Happens across all levels, right? From my kindergarteners to early grade schoolers to middle schoolers to high school, even in college. Chattering is something that's real inside the classroom. So, what will you say if they won't stop, even if you've called out a lot of times already? So now, okay, while you're thinking, so for example, using the continuum, the authoritarian teacher would be would say, okay, be quiet, or again, you'll get detention, face the wall, thinking corner, or go outside of the classroom, right? And then the permissive end, what will that teacher do? Just ignore it. I will go with the lesson. Bahala kayo dyan. Or it could also be that they won't get to finish the lesson because of all the chattering that's happening, right? So, what about a warm demander? What about firmness with heart script? What will we say? You can ask them to pause. Quiet voices, voices off. And we'll start again once it's quiet, once everyone's ready. Or you can also talk about what happens when all of us are talking at the same time. So that's also bringing out the answers from them. So they have more um, agency and ownership of what's happening inside the classroom. So for very young learners, we we have hand signals also uh that helps regulate the classroom and themselves. So when we say this, that means we stop. Yeah. So when they see us do this, even without speaking, and then they stop. Okay. So we can also once they've hushed already, so we can say, okay, let's reset. Right. So how does that work? Why does that work? So we have to keep in mind calm tone plus the clarity. Right. Again, those are means and ways on how we can show our students that boundaries matter. How about here? Students refuse to do work. Ayaw niyang gawin kung ano yung nakaplan for the day. What will we do? Okay. So on the authoritarian side, do it or fail. And then like what I mentioned a while ago, and from the permissive end, okay, maybe we can work on it tomorrow. Saying, I'll let you finish the rest independently. You can also say, thank you for trying. Let me know if how can I help you, but let's try. Can also say, I believe you can do this. Let me know what support you need. So again, balancing compassion, acknowledging the difficulty with accountability that work completion is non-negotiable. Okay, how about disrespectful language? Sometimes nga, di ba, the tone itself is disrespectful already. From the authoritarian side, you can say, they can say, watch it or you're out. Permissive, they'll just laugh it off, right? But for teachers who has firmness with heart, again, acknowledging, validating the emotion. So I hear you're upset, but you have to reject the behavior. But disrespectful language is not how we talk here. Let's try that again. Right? So you can be frustrated, but we need respectful words inside the classroom. I'll wait until you're ready. So again, validate, acknowledge the emotion, reject the behavior, and um, preserve the dignity of the child. So it's not the child you're attacking, it's not the learner that you are correcting. They're not the ones that are bad, but the action or the word. How about here? Students argue when corrected. Okay, two ways. Students who argue when corrected or students who make face when corrected. Right? So authoritarian, the harsh side, don't talk back. Permissive, you just let them. You just let them argue. No holds bar. But with firmness with heart, I hear what you're saying, but my answer won't change. Let's move on. You have to do it, right? Or we can talk about this later, but right now, we have to get back to the task. So what's important there is you calmly end power struggle and keep the focus on the task at hand. And here, students coming in late, right? How does a warm demander address this? So glad you're here, glad you made it, but you missed this part already. For example, the settling in. So you may start right away. And then if it's constantly happening, if it's chronically happening, um please be here on time. I want you here on time because your learning matters. Let's talk about how to make that happen, right? So how it works, why it works. You have to acknowledge the behavior, affirm the students' value, and continue setting expectations. Right? So far, we've talked about boundaries, right? What they are, why they matter, how they shape the classroom culture. But the reality is boundaries don't live in our PowerPoint presentation today, right? They don't live in our classroom rules chart. Boundaries actually live in our daily choices as teachers, in those little moments where we decide whether to step in or let something slide. And you see, the strongest boundaries are the ones we write down or announce at the start of the school year. The strongest boundaries are the ones that we consistently hold with calm, predictability, and respect. Okay, so your students, they'll forget what's written on our walls, what's written on the rule book, for instance, but they'll never forget how we responded when the moments get tough, right? When it comes to setting boundaries, consistency is credibility. So if we enforce a boundary one day but ignore it the next, students will learn that our words actually don't carry any weight. Okay? So that's why we teachers, we're human, right? We all have our trigger points. Um, what are possible trigger points? Eye rolling, talking back, blurting out answers, right? And when we don't know our triggers, we swing permissive, we avoid conflicts, or we swing authoritarian, we snap harshly. So, as teachers, we have to know that self awareness helps us choose the authoritative or the warm demander stance instead. Okay, so now think of the following questions. Okay, which behavior trigger me the most? Yeah, what are your pet peeves? Is it sarcasm, constant interruption, chronic lateness? So you see, these triggers, they often connect with our own values. Next, where do I lean permissive? Are you the one who don't call out lateness because you hate confrontation? Do you lean permissive when students start throwing tantrums, right? Now, where do I lean authoritarian? That's related to the first question. If that's your trigger, more likely than not, you snap, right? Or it could also be when I'm tired, I snap too quickly. And there. What's one boundary I need to hold more clearly? So you see, boundaries start with self awareness. Before we can hold students accountable, we should know all these. We should know the answer to all these. We're talking about setting boundaries. Boundaries are not just about them, it could also be about us. And boundaries are not just about us, but about them too. So students are testing not only the rules, but us to see if we mean what we say and if we'll stay steady in what we're saying. All right. So boundaries aren't about being perfect, they're being about predictable. Students don't need us to win, to to win every battle. They need to know where the lines are so they can calmly hold on to those every time. Okay. So again, last pause and ponder for today. So take a minute to think, what's that one boundary? Let's start small. What's that one boundary you will enforce with both warmth and firmness tomorrow? Right? So clear, calm, consistent. That's how trust is built. Right? So as we close, um something that we should always remember, boundaries are not about punishments. They're also not barriers, right? Boundaries are actually bridges. They connect our high expectations with genuine care for our students. So when we consistently set and hold our boundaries, our students receive certain messages. So when you're a warm demander, when you're setting that boundary with heart, they feel, oh, I am cared for, I am capable, and I will be held accountable. So those three messages, that those are at the heart of teaching with both firmness and compassion. So this week, when we move forward, next month, next week, um, when the testing moments come, and I'm sure they will, so let's pause, let's breathe, and lean on our reflections. Try to think back on the scripts that we talked about today and your stance as a warm demander. Again, we don't have to be perfect. We just have to be consistent. So again, that calm consistency is the greatest gift that we can give our students when it comes to managing classroom management and self-regulation, right? So again, firmness without warmth is harsh. Now, warmth without firmness, it's hollow. But when put together, firmness and warmth, they shape the classroom where students feel safe, respected, and um, pushed to grow, right? And that's the work of boundaries with heart. So, thank you very much for your kind attention today, everybody. Just let me know if you have questions.
Thank you so much, Miss Mel Garcia. That was a fantastic presentation. We really greatly appreciate it. Well, there on the screen, we now have the QR code, which you can scan to claim the certificate. And I also posted the link at the in the chat box. You can click on the link and fill up the form so that you can get your certificate. And for any questions, concerns about the recordings or the certificates, just email activities.catalyst@gmail.com. Once again, Ma'am Melissa, thank you so much. And we hope to see you again in our other future webinar series, um, as well as all of you who are here in the Zoom room now. We hope to be able to see you in our other future Catalyst webinars. Thank you so much, everyone. God bless. Take care. We'll close this Zoom room in three, two, bye, everyone, and one.